Hello, BookTube. I want to continue with the Western Canon starter kit, and we have a big one to do today. But before I do that, I wanted to clear up something that came up yesterday. Um, I believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, that I've had an addition to my family. And since I made no proper introductions and got a huge amount of crap for not doing it, I thought I would do that right now. A friend of mine here in Boston, living over by Fenway, uh, came into possession of a puppy, a miniature schnauzer, a female miniature schnauzer, and realized right away that she was in over her head and that was a bad idea. And as I'm coming to realize, she first thought what I am coming to realize I have trained a large part of Boston to think, which is if you've got a dog problem, you should probably call Steve. So she did. Uh, and the result is feeling a little sleepy, and considering the holy hell she's been for the last 10 hours, I don't doubt it. The result is this. The result is this. She's a baby. She's newborn. She's 8 weeks old. She doesn't know anything. She's never experienced anything. She doesn't have a name. Uh, and she's just about the sweetest thing I have met in a lifetime of dogs. uh, I have, I have. Here, I'm going to put you down. All right. You don't have to bite my nose every time we talk. She's rather fond of biting my nose. It's. I'm going to put you down. Okay. You go back down there. There you go. As I've been informed by some people who have had, this is my first terrier, and I've been informed by people who've had them that I'm in for a wild ride. That's okay. Uh, the main question on my mind for the last 2 days has been my other dog, my sweet, beautiful Malin Moore. She, of course, is the most important thing. You don't tell someone that you've known and loved for 15 years, well, here's the new reality, deal with it, or hit the road. So the question in my mind was, what will be the relationship between the two of them? If it's instant rejection, then I have a rather extensive canine network. I am certain that I could find a good home for this little puppy. But so far, that hasn't happened. So far, Malin's reaction has been just about as good as I could expect. She only had actual affection in her for one dog, and that dog is gone. So I wasn't really expecting affection, and there hasn't been any. Instead, there's been a kind of tolerant ignoring that's helped quite a bit by the fact that the little puppy isn't pushing things, as is the way with tiny little puppies. When it's a little more time has passed, you probably test her boundaries a lot more. But right now, all she wants, all she feels about this much bigger dog in this strange big new world is intimidation. So she has no idea yet how weak Malin is, no idea how little Malin can see or hear. All she knows is this is a big veteran of this world, and I had better do what she does. And that's actually helping a lot, because as those of you who've had them will know, 8-week-old puppies, just weaned puppies, don't know anything about anything. They don't even know how to eat. You'll put food in front of them and they'll have no idea what to do. Or they'll take one bite of it and carry it off somewhere to examine it and play with it and leave the rest of it alone. So it's been a little bit of an upheaval here at Hyde Cottage. Yet again, as when my fat little basset hound Lucy was in the last months of her life, so too now I'm really grateful that I don't sleep like a normal person. I don't know what I would do. As it is, she's absolutely exhausted right now, so she's not going to be in this video. And that's just as well, because another drift I was getting from the comments from yesterday is none of you were paying attention to me. Keep in mind, I'm the cute one. Anyway, she will almost certainly. I find it hard to believe that Malin's reaction will significantly worsen from what it is now. I don't see how her reaction won't, if anything, improve from this point out. I think surely the shock and the little pudgy nugget running around and pulling at things, surely that's going to provoke a negative reaction if anything is. And if that doesn't, nothing will. But we'll see. I'm myself kind of committed. So I'm going to have to make this work. and I think I can. You'll be getting updates. But in the meantime, we're going to do the Western Canon starter kit because it's bothering me that it's taking so long. It's bothering me that it's going on so long. And you would think that if I'm being bothered by that, the very first thing I would do would be to speed things up and simplify things even more than we already are. And I'm not going to do that because the point at which it's bothering me that this is taking so long coincides with what I maintain, and I will maintain it against all comers, is an absolutely freakish period of human history. You hear explosions of creativity and groundbreaking paradigm shifting. You hear that sort of stuff said about Periclean Athens. You hear it said about the Renaissance most of all. You hear it said about the Enlightenment. And I'm here to tell you, as a more than casual student of history, none of those times, none of those great creative watersheds hold a candle to the Victorian era. Nothing in human history up until the present time, nothing before computers comes anywhere close to the Victorian era for advances in everything, for gigantic, huge leaps forward, for brilliance in everything, in literature, poetry, in medicine, in science, in nature writing, in book criticism, my own profession, you name it, literally you name it, art, poetry, all of it, architecture, something in the period of time that we're talking about, from a little bit before the middle of the 19th century to a little bit after the beginning of the 20th century, something in that period gelled, and all of a sudden the landscape is absolutely littered with landmarks, and I don't quite understand what that something is. I of course have a pet theory. Those of you who are familiar with some of my drunken rants in real life will probably be able to guess what that theory is. I don't maintain that there is any one theory, but one way or another, in the Western Canon starter kit, even when we restrict ourselves vigorously, the Victorian era, which is what we're up to now, is a killer. It's a killer from my undergirding contention of this whole thing, that this is a thing that you can do, a thing you can actually do, a thing that doesn't have to be intimidating, and that doesn't have to take a lifetime. I do still maintain that, but I'm afraid this is not going to be a short installment of the Western Canon starter kit. I have stripped away everything that I can think of here in order to make this doable. And I'm still going to need 2 videos, and even then I'm leaving out God's own plenty. I'm not going to talk about history. I'm not going to talk about biography. I'm not going to talk about literary criticism or book reviewing or poetry or drama. I'm not going to talk about any of those things. We're just going to talk about fiction. It kills me to do this. But as some of you have been obscenely suggesting in the comments field, clearly there will be another Western Canon series. I don't know what's wrong with you people. I really don't. But for now, for the Western Canon starter kit, for the playlist that you're going to be able to make, that is just the basics, we're going to do a part 1 for the Victorian era, and that's going to be literature from the United Kingdom. And part 2 will be America. Will be American literature, and we'll stop it right there. Even though that same time period, a little bit before the beginning of the middle of the 19th century, to a little bit after the beginning of the 20th century, was also a time of explosion in creativity everywhere, all over the world. We could go country by country, but we're just going to do those 2. Otherwise, we'll be here forever. So we're going to do part 1 of the Victorian era, and that is the United Kingdom, English literature. And we're going to start, I want to start first, since we're talking about Victorian fiction, we're talking about Victorian literature, I want to start by making a plug for an event for Victober 2017. It's a booktube read along with a series of challenges and a lot of great discussions, a lot of great fun, and it's hosted by, I wrote them all down because it's hosted by Katie at Books and Things, of course. It's hosted by Ange at Beyond the Pages, Kate Howe, and Lucy the Reader. They've all come together to make Victober 2017, which is designed to encourage you to read Victorian literature. So it's actually kind of fortuitously timed, because we'll still be doing the Victorians next time as well. Technically the Victorians. But anyway, we're going to start, and we're going to go right through these, because this video doesn't have to be long just because the amount of reading you're going to do is enormous. And we're going to start. Everything about this era is freakish. Everything. But we're going to start with perhaps the most freakish part of the literary era of them all, and that's the Bronte sisters. these three wild girls from a parsonage in the middle of nowhere, in an extremely improbable narrative. One of those sisters might write an immortal classic of English literature. In Oh, Come On, Do You Expect Me to Believe That version of the narrative, maybe two of them would. And one of them would be a classic of English literature, maybe one of them would be a minor classic, East Lynne, something like that. And nowhere in anyone's imagination would all three of the girls in that parsonage write classics that you have to read. But in the Victorian era, a bespectacled naturalist can come up with a scientific theory that will upend literally the entire world, and think, I don't know, and put it in a drawer for a decade. In the Victorian era, explorers will suffer malaria and frostbite and be out in the middle of the wilderness in places where today they would only be braved by a Gore-Tex-wearing, oxygen tank-carrying professional. Here you have these people in the Victorian era out there in their boots and shirts, and what do while they're suffering from malaria or night sweats or dengue fever? They write great poetry. Or a scientific treatise that's brilliant and also eloquent. Anyway, whatever it is that's freakish in the Victorian psyche is most easily visible in the fact that we have the Bronte sisters, and we might have had a Bronte brother. Branwell Bronte might well have written a classic as well. We don't know because he drank himself to death, but the sisters all did. And they each wrote one book that you have to read. So we'll start with Emily, of course, Wuthering Heights. You have to read Wuthering Heights. And then Charlotte with Jane Eyre. And then Anne with The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. All three of those you have to read. They're pure balls of raw energy. They don't really care if you read them, if that makes sense. They're not trying to set a norm or to change the world or to do anything. They're howls out of the moor. But brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And they did change literature. So you do have to read all three of the Bronte sisters. I would also strongly advise, I know I don't always do this, and it's not necessary for the Western Canon Starter Kit, but Juliet Barker did a great collective biography of the Brontes. It's still in print. If there's any justice in the world, it'll be in print forever. It's an amazing reading experience on its own, so I highly recommend it, but we'll get back to the list now. So once you're done with the Bronte sisters, we move on to the literary figure who is probably synonymous with the era, and that's Charles Dickens. Now, I've made no secret of the fact on this channel that I'm not his #1 fan. In terms of just enjoyability, I think that Anthony Trollope beats him. But Anthony Trollope is not on this list. Dickens is. And for Dickens, he wrote 10 books that you have to read. But in the interest of the spirit of the Western Canon Starter Kit, I've narrowed it down to just 2. And that's David Copperfield and Bleak House. If you read those 2, and you're intimidated by the task of reading Dickens, or it's just a lot and you're worried you have the time or whatever, those 2 novels will give you a very good idea of Dickens. And I believe that once you get to the end of the second one, once you get to the end of whichever of those you read second, you'll know whether or not you want to read the rest of Dickens. I feel certain that you'll know that. You won't need any more than that. And also, once you get to the end of the first of the 2 books, you'll know why he was so popular in his day. I might fault the man for a lot. I do. But boy, oh boy, can he tell a story. So you'll see. You'll see right away. But if you haven't read Dickens, then now's the time to do it. And you will, of course, not want for editions. And then we're going to finish off. This is already a long video. We're going to finish off with two books, only two, but they're both enormous. And they're both enormously important. And also enormously good, toweringly great. You have to read them both. Sooner or later, you have to read them both. And if you're going through in chronological order of literature, there's no way to avoid them. There's no way to get around them. And the first of them is William Thackeray's Vanity Fair. An enormous novel with one standout character, lots of great secondary characters, and a couple of fantastic set pieces, and a feel of humor to it that set a tone. Really, I think actually Vanity Fair, if anything, is underestimated in how much it showed the reading world. And keep in mind, the reading world includes everyone who's going to go on to be in the writing world. Everybody reads before they write. I think Vanity Fair did a lot more than almost any other novel that we've talked about to show readers what a novel could do, and how it could get in at them, how it could affect them, and what fun the author could have. And if that's true for Vanity Fair, it's even more true for our next book, the final book on the part one of the Victorian era of the Western Canon Starter Kit. And that book, of course, is Middlemarch by George Eliot, which has been called, by people who have not read it to the end, the greatest novel ever written. But in its own defense, it's also been called that by people who've read it and many other things to the end. I don't know how, even in a video of half an hour, I could do justice to what Middlemarch is. You have to read it for yourself, and not just once, to see. And once you do, you'll look back at this video and say, well, if I had a day, I couldn't summarize what this is. It's a whole universe, but it's not just a whole universe. It's not just the story of a whole universe in this one little microcosm town. It's often been called a whole universe in a little microcosm town called Middlemarch. It's not just that. It's the story of a whole universe in a little microcosm town, narrated by God, and God is a woman. I know I'm not making any sense, but with Middlemarch, there's hardly any way to make sense. It is unavoidable, and you shouldn't want to avoid it. You'll be put off at first, because the narrator, George Eliot, in this book, is off-putting at first. Even people who have read the book a dozen times still find it a little awe-inducing, and I understand that. I do myself. But it's going to wrap up our Victorian era starter kit, because to do any more than these would be to make the list even longer than I want it to be. And my God, could I do more? This is nothing. This is a drop in the bucket. I haven't mentioned Thomas Hardy. I haven't mentioned Elizabeth Gaskell. Or to go into depth on the work that they did. Oh my God. It goes on and on. But to get a handle on the Victorian era in England, you can start with these. That's the whole point of a starter kit. And next time we'll move on across the pond. We will not go to Russia. We will not go to China. We will just go to America and keep things as concise as possible. So I'm going to wrap up for now, but of course, before I do that, I'm going to haul herself up onto camera again here. They want to see you. They want to see you more than they want to see me. Look at that. Who's that? Huh? Will you stop biting my nose? Who's that? Huh? Who's that? I'm gonna deal with her now because she's awake, and that means trouble. But I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.